Hi, I'm Matt, and in this part of the iNav series, we're going to be setting up iNav and getting the basic settings in to your flight controller. So with that said, I've already got my flight controller plugged into the computer. I assume you've got the same. So let's go and click on connect in the top right hand corner. Brilliant. We've now been connected. Now, if this is the first time you've been and seen the iNav Configurator, hit pause in just a moment. The reason being is that I've already done an introduction episode to the iNav Configurator. So if this is the first time you've been and seen it, I do have a separate video and I'll put a link to that in the top right hand corner of your screen. Sorry, I don't know which side it is. And I'll take you through the iNav Configurator. So all of these sections are not scary or new to you. So assuming that you have been and seen that part of the series, let's go and get the basic settings in for our flight controller board. Now, the first thing to note is that I've got the flight controller in front of me and I'm just unplugging it a moment. There we go. And you'll notice that I'm turning it around and you'll see that the picture of a quad is moving. Now, that picture does tell you which way the front of the board is. So you'll notice, let me just turn it around that way and point it down. There we go. That is the front of the board. Now, if you don't know which way round your board is, on 99% of the boards, the PWM pins point to the front of the model. If you're not sure, do check your where you purchase your board from, and most of the time you will end up with an arrow pointing towards the front of the board on the actual flight controller itself. So let's put the flight controller down there. The main thing is that we're twiddling it around and it's moving on the screen. But it is showing a picture of a quadcopter and not a flying wing. And remember, this series is purely focused upon flying wings. So with that said, let's go into our presets on the left-hand side. Oh, actually, before we go any further, it is vitally important for me to point out that we will need and you will need to calibrate your flight controller. I will cover this with you in a separate episode. Do not skip that episode. I need to be 100% clear on that. You must calibrate your flight controller, and I will do a separate video for you in a later episode. So let me just move that down there out of the way. Right, let's plow on. Now, a preset which I've had fantastic success with is the Flying Wing Z84. So a little Wing Z84. The preset for this model has worked really, really well for me, especially even in the big Skywalker Falcon. So the Z84 is a little 600mm wing, okay? The Skywalker Falcon is a 1.2, 1.3 meter wing, and the settings have worked perfectly fine. So that's the setting which we're going to choose, or the preset. I've selected Flying Wing on the left hand side, and then of course you click apply in the bottom right hand corner and then click on save and reboot. Now the save and reboot, you're going to get used to this. It's going to happen lots of times during this episode. Brilliant. So let's click on reconnect, and you'll now see that the picture's been changed to a box instead. Okay, so we're getting there. Happy days. Let's go to the ports tab. Now the ports tab, this top row where it says USB VCP, do not change that row. I'm going to color that in red on your screen. Okay, do not change the first row. That's the dangerous row. If you do untick that option or do something with that first row, chances are you won't be able to connect to your board, and the easiest way out of that is to reflash iNav on it, so stay well away. I'm going to untick MSP for UART1, okay, to make sure that is UART1, which we're unchecking that option for. And the reason for that is that if you're using an Omnibus F4 V1 or V2 board, is that we're going to use UART1 for our input connection for our receiver. So it doesn't matter if you're using PPM or SBus, that's what we need that to free that one up so that we can use PPM or SBus with that connector or that UART port. Brilliant. I am actually going to set mine to R serial RX because I do have an X8R receiver on my desk. I will show you how to connect that in a later episode as well. Dead simple to do. And also, while we're at it, we're going to enable GPS and set that to 115200. And that may not save, and it's not the end of the world here. And the reason why I'm saying it may not save is because we haven't set the rest of the settings in iNav. And I will cover the setting up with the GPS in a later episode. So anyway, save and reboot in the bottom right hand corner. Like I said, you're going to get used to this save and reboot process. We will be doing it many times. Right, we've done the ports tab. Oh, they both saved. Happy days. Let's go down to configuration. Now you'll see that the model, which is, well, the mixer which has been set up is for a flying wing. Remember, this series is on setting it up for a flying wing. Obviously, if you're going to be using an aeroplane, then you would want to have chosen aeroplane and maybe back on the presets tab chosen the aeroplane version. But like I said, we are setting up our iNav flight controller board for a flying wing. Scrolling down, now this may be a shock horror to some of you, but I'm going to change the barometer to none. And the reason for that is very simple, is the GPS units which we're going to be using with our flying wings, the Neo M8N ones are absolutely fantastic. The GPS will provide a very good fix, and it will be able to tell your height and your direction and your speed and your location. You can, of course, select to leave the barometer enabled, but personally, I would strongly suggest that you don't. My previous interactions with iNav, the issues which I have or had seem to be all orientated around a bad barometer, and I would hate for you to have foam snow, so I am going to strongly suggest that you set the barometer to none. Right, moving down, like I said, we are going to be setting this one up for S-Bus, and I will be using a FrSky X8R, so a couple of preemptive settings, and I will cover this in a separate episode, but I've chosen serial-based receiver and changed that to S-Bus. Obviously, if you're going to be using PPM, you just change that one setting to PPM RX input, and that's your job done for that section. I am going to enable the GPS while we're at it. Like I said, I'll cover that fully in a separate episode. Coming back up to the top, scroll up. I'm going to enable the motor and servo output. I'm also going to choose don't spin the motors when armed. By the way, those of you which are just using normal servos, leave your servo refresh rate to 50 Hertz. Now, I always change this on mine. I change the minimum throttle to 1000 and the maximum to 2000. Scrolling down. Now, one thing with iNav and flying wings and models, don't change your system configurations rates, okay? Just leave the frequency in the loops as they are. You're going to be perfectly fine. These boards in a flying wing or a normal RC model are absolute overkill. You do not need to change your PID loops, and that's a message aimed at you quad boys. You know who you are. You don't need to change the PID loops. Scrolling down, now on the V1 board you have a battery monitor included. In the V2 board, which we're setting up right now, we actually have a current sensor on this one, so I'm going to go and enable the current sensor. Now, where it says scale the output voltage to milliamperes, I'm actually going to change that to 740, and that seems like a big jump. And the reason for that is that I've actually calibrated a couple of the other boards, and 740 seems to be a really good value for me personally with the boards which I've got to get the current about right. I will show you how to configure and to calibrate the current sensor in a later episode, but for right now, 740 seems to have worked really well for me, so that's the value which I'm putting in there. And then scrolling down, I am going to enable telemetry output. Again, I'm using FrSky kit, and it's got telemetry in there by default. And the one crucial one, which you cannot skip because it will cause you fun later on, is that enable the OSD option at the bottom. Both the V1 and the V2 flight controller boards, they both have OSDs built in, and we must enable that feature, otherwise we won't be able to upload the fonts. Outstanding. Save and reboot. Like I said, you're going to get used to these save and reboots. They happen frequently. Right, let's reconnect. So that's the configuration tab. Now we're going to go into failsafe. We are going to choose return to home, okay, and so that means is that if the model hits a failsafe, okay, we want the model to return to home. We've changed the settings, so we're going to click save and reboot and reconnect. So where were we? Failsafe. I'm going to leave PID tuning alone. I strongly suggest that you also leave PID tuning alone. There was a chap in the Facebook group, literally only yesterday when I'm recording this, ran into some issues because before his maiden flight, he changed some of his PIDs. don't change them. If you're flying a flying wing, the Z84 is a fantastic place. That Z84 preset is a fantastic place for you to start from. Keep that in the back of your mind. Now, when it comes to the advanced tuning tab, the one section, there's a couple of sections which we're looking for. Right, we need to change a couple of settings on this tab. Now, by default, iNav sets the return to home height to 10 meters. Now, the thing is, 10 meters for me personally, and it's probably exactly the same for you, is not high enough. Now, this value over here on the left-hand side is actually in centimeters. So if we want it to come back at 30 meters, we change that to 3,000. I'm actually going to change mine to 70 meters, which is approximately 230 feet. Again, that will change based upon your flying site. So if you fly on a flying site and there's no trees for miles, then maybe 30 meters would be a more suitable value. But do not leave it as 10 meters, because 10 meters is not very high in the sky. And yeah, absolute minimum, I would suggest 30. For me and my board, I'm going to set mine to 70 meters. So when the model goes out, you either hit the return to home switch or it hits failsafe and the model comes back to you. It's going to return to you at 70 meters or approximately 230 feet in the sky. Climb before return to home is also going to be enabled. We are going to be copy and pasting a couple of additional settings into the CLI tab as well, just for sanity too. Scrolling down, there's a couple of details in there. Cruise throttle. Just because I've already been and pre-flown the Skywalker Falcon, I know that we need a little bit more throttle on the way back, so I'm going to change my cruise throttle to 1500. Also, I'm going to allow iNav to use a little bit more throttle, so I'm going to change that to 1800, so that's slightly further up the throttle stick, and I've been and changed those. Now, one other setting which you might, or two other settings you want to might be aware of, is that in the stabilize modes, is that you might want some more bank angles, if that makes sense. So I'm going to change that from 20 to 35 to allow a greater bank angle in the model itself, so it's not such a big circle when we're in stabilize modes. And the loiter radius, I'm actually going to tweak that down to 40 meters. So the loiter means is that when the model flies out and then you hit return to home and it comes back, we will change the setting so that it loiters when it returns instead of trying to land. Is the circle which it makes, either on coming back from a return to home, or maybe you enable loiter mode, and when you find something of interest and you hit loiter mode and you get it to circle, 40 meters is actually quite a big radius, so that's what I'm going to set on this one. So I'm going to click on save and reboot for those. Wait for it to reconnect. There we go. So where were we? We were in advanced tuning. That was a bit scary, wasn't it? It says advanced, but really straightforward. Receiver. I will cover the receiver setup in the next part of this series with you. Okay, we'll get back to that one in a few moments. Well, in the next episode. Modes. We have a separate episode on modes for you. Okay, that's later in this series. Really straightforward, and I'll show you how I set mine up in my receiver, in my transmitter, and the different modes which we have. Adjustments. You will be in the adjustments tab. Adjustments tab you can ignore. The servos tab, that's what I was trying to mention. The servos tab, chances are when you go to set up your model, and we'll go through these steps together, we may need to come in here, and in fact I know for sure that we'll need to change servo free, so that row there, servo free, to minus 100%, because the servo will need reversing. Okay, I know for a fact we'll need to do that with the Skywalker Falcon, but I will show you how you know whether you need to do that in a later episode. GPS, obviously we don't have the GPS connected just yet. I'll show you how to do that in a later episode. Give you a little sneak preview. Total messages is the only number which you're interested in, because if that number's incrementing, so if it's going from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and just counting up in numbers, that means the GPS is working. So if you were to walk outside with the board and the GPS connected, it would get a fix. Moving on, motors tab, we'll cover that at a later date. OSD. Now our on-screen display. This is where you can set up your on-screen display. I think for ease of use for you, I will cover the on-screen display in a separate episode. But that said, I'm going to give you a quick little overview right now, because the only one thing you need to make sure that you've done for the OSD setup is down here on the bottom right hand corner, click on Font Manager. Now, I'm a bit 50-50 on this one. I'm actually going to go with default, or the default font, rather than the bold font. It's up to you. I quite like the default font, so I'm going to go for that one. So choose between default and bold. To be honest, you don't need large. Large is absolutely massive. Obviously, if you're slightly visually impaired, the bold or the large may be better for you. But in my case, I kind of like the default font. For me, it's very readable on the screen. And of course, it's very easy to see through that font as well. So I've clicked on default, and then we're going to click on upload font. Now, if that upload in that blue bar is not working for you, okay, you need to go back to the configurations tab, go down to the bottom, enable the OSD, and then come back and repeat that step. That caught me out for a while. Anyway, let's get back to the OSD tab. Now, there's lots of different things which you can set around on this screen. I do have like this. I tell you what, no, let's not break this into a separate episode. You're here. I've got a bit of coffee left. Let's go and set this up right now. Right, there's a couple of things on this OSD which just like this format which I use, and it's coming from using an equal tree vector. I just like the layout. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move some of these pieces around on the screen. Now, do note there is a collection of things which you can enable on the left hand side or disable as the case may be, and then we'll go through each one-ish and then set them up on the screen. Now, I don't like the horizontal sidebars, so I'm going to turn those off. And we've just seen that they've been and disappeared off the screen. RSSI value, and again, I need to just move some of these things out the way. And you'll just see that I'm just clicking and dragging and dropping them. And you'll notice that I'm not trying to drag and drop them on each other, okay? Because then you end up with two sets of things on top of each other, and you may not spot it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start from the top left-hand corner, and you'll notice that I'm one or two sections in. So that's the RSSI value, the 99, and you'll notice when I hover my mouse on there, it goes bold on the left-hand side. And again, a little tip for you, if you don't know which one's which, is that if you just turn it on and off, it will appear or disappear from the screen. So I've got RSSI, and the next one is the fly mode. So where it says stab, so if you click between, say, pass-through mode to horizon to acro or angle, that message will change. Or if you click into return to home, it will say RTL on your on-screen display. So I've got that in the top left-hand corner. Then I want height. Now, but let's pretend I don't know which one is, sorry, not height, the speed. So I'm going to look down here for the left-hand side, GPS speed. There we go. And there we go. It wasn't even enabled. So I'm going to enable GPS speed. That was 40, and I'm going to put that to the left of the horizontal artificial horizon, should I say there. Next, we've got the GPS satellites. I'm going to move that across one too many. There we go. And let's move some of these things out of the way. We'll rearrange those in just a moment. Now, I do want to enable longitude and latitude. And the reason why I want to enable those is because if the model ever goes down and I'm recording the DVR, I know where it is. So I'm just going to rearrange those quite nicely down there. And you'll notice that I've put them on separate rows. You could, of course, put one over here on the right-hand side and one on the left-hand side. Don't put them right next to each other like that. The reason being is that when you're in flight, you actually end up with extra numbers on the end, and you'll lose some of your resolution just in case you do need to go and fetch your model. Okay, so keep them on separate rows, or one side of the screen and the other one on the opposite side of the screen. Okay, and you'll also see that I've got the GPS sats just above there. So we're in the goggles. I can see the RSSI value. I can see the mode which I'm in the top left-hand corner. I look down, or you look down to the bottom left-hand corner, and we can see that, oh, we've got 14 satellites, and we've got our latitude and longitude. Next part which we're going to set up is the return to home, or not return to home, the the distance to home and the direction to home. And there's one mistake which you can make with this, and this is the mistake which I made, so you get to skip this one. So I'm going to enable direction to home. So where did that come up on the screen? Anybody see that? Ah, look, it's hiding just there. There we go. Just dragged it out. And again, you saw what I did there. I was just enabling it and looking for it to appear on the screen. So that's the direction to home. I'm going to put that there, and then distance to home. There we go. And that one's got the arrow on it, and I'm going to put that above, and I'm actually going to move that across a touch. I'm going to try and get that in the middle of the screen at the top. So I'm going to go across one more. Actually, I'm going to bring that down a row. There we go. And of course, what I would suggest that you do with your on-screen display is just change the settings, go and fly the model. If you like it, that's happy days. Or you may just know, actually, I didn't like that there. When you come back home again, plug your board in and then change your settings. So big tip for you, make sure these are on separate rows. When I did my first iNav Maiden, what I had was these two numbers were next to each other, and then when the distance to home got greater than 1,000 feet, is that I lost the arrow, and I didn't know which way home was. Well, according to the OSD screen, of course I knew where I was, so that was fine. But just make sure that those two are on separate rows. Right. What I'm also going to do is that we've got some additional options here. So on time, I just don't like that one, so I'm going to turn that one off. But I do like the fly time, so I'm going to pop that down on the right hand side. So that gives us an indication on how long we've been in the sky. So I've got that now in the bottom right hand corner. And then the right hand side is that I need to just tweak a few of these up out of the way a moment. And again, you'll see what I'm doing. I'm just rearranging a couple of these, and we'll put that over there. Right. The one setting which I do like on the right hand side is the height. So that's the altitude, and it shows 399.7 feet. Okay, so I've now got speed on the left and height on the right hand side. Now we've got a couple of other settings here. Now let me just rearrange these quickly, and I'll explain what I've got set up and why I've got them set up in this order. So I'll move the throttle down. Where is milliamp for drawn? Ah, it's hiding down there. There we go. Right. So what I've got those two. Again, I'm quite particular on my layouts, and I'll explain why, because it just kind of makes sense to me. So on the top right hand corner of our again, this is my OSD. You can change it for your own. In the top right hand corner, I've got the main battery voltage. Then I've got current drawn. Then I've got milliamperes drawn. Okay, now remember, those values are only going to be roughly accurate, even if it's calibrated. Okay, so we use those as an acid test of how much current we've actually drawn out of our battery. And the other one is the throttle position, which sounds a bit daft, but if you've got the goggles down, you could be anywhere on that stick and you don't know. And that's that value there. So right now it says 69, so that's 69% of throttle which you're using. So you're like three quarters of the way at the throttle stick, you know. So we can visually see that there. So that's the layout which I've gone with. Of course, it's your on-screen display. I just like that format. And the reason why I like that format is that I can look into the top left-hand corner. I can see RSSI and the mode, which I'm flying in. Then at the very top, I can see the distance to home and the direction to home. Again, replace I with you, okay? Then in the top right-hand corner, I can see the pack voltage, the current consumption, if that makes sense. The amount of milliamperes used, again, that depends if you're using the V2 board or not, because that one's got a current sensor on board. Then we've got the current throttle setting, how much welly are we giving the model. And then in the middle, we've got the horizontal horizon. On the left, we have the speed, and on the right, we have the height. Those kind of go together. Then in the bottom left-hand corner, we've got the GPS satellites, and the current location with latitude and longitude. And then in the bottom right hand corner, we've got the flight timer. That is a layout which works really well for me. Now, I would suggest that you've kind of follow what I've been and done for my setup for my OSD, but it's your OSD. If you don't want to see the direction to home, then disable it, you know, it's your on-screen display. Now, a big note here is that if you've been and made any changes, you must press save in the bottom right hand corner. Also, when it comes to these settings on the right hand side, you can get to choose between auto, which I strongly suggest you do, and then for the units, I'm based in the United Kingdom, so I've set those to metric, okay, and then I'm going to press save on the right hand side. Okay, so those are my settings for the on-screen display. And that's it. There is actually one other set of settings which we do need to set up now. Now, this does look a little bit scary. So I've clicked into the CLI tab. I do need to go and get a browser window, so you're going to have to give me a moment. And I'm just going off to the iNav Wiki. Now, I'll give you a little heads up. I have actually been in the iNav Wiki and tweaked their fixed wing guide a little bit. So I'll put a link to this in the video description for you. And what we're going to go and do is copy and paste a couple of settings. So there we go. Step 4, replace default values. So what we're going to do, we're just going to do a little bit of copy and paste. So where it says step 4, replace these values. Remember, a link to this page is in the video description. I'm going to go and copy those. And down here where it says write your commands, I'm going to right click, choose paste and press enter. Those are those two set. Now there's a note about switch arming. I'll show you how to do that in the next episode. So we're going to set small angle to 180. And the reason why we're setting the small angle to 180 is that it then allows you to arm your model in any kind of position, basically. Okay, whereas like a quad, you have to lay it flat and then you can arm it. Whereas that with a fixed wing model, you may have it in your hand and then you arm it, you know, and it's not going to be flat. Big one here, set nav allow return allow landing. Now the reason why we're turning this off is by default right now, as of today when I'm recording this, is that the default for iNav is that when the model comes back from a return to home, whether it's been a failsafe or you've hit return to launch, is the model will attempt to land itself. And for me, and that's probably the same for you, that is undesirable. So by setting set nav underscore RTH underscore allow underscore landing to off, when the model returns, it will loiter above you. That's what that loiter radius was, which we had before. Now, I do know that we did set this in a previous on the advanced tuning tab, but I am actually going to go and make sure that return to home climb first is off. Okay, and the reason why we're setting this one is because when you hit return to launch, if that's set to on, what will happen is the model will then carry on flying, climb up, and then when it gets to its height, turn around and then come back to you. If you turn that off, is that you hit return to launch, the model will turn left or right and then climb on the way back to you. Just makes more sense. So by setting that setting, that's happy days. Now that's it for those settings. Now for those settings to take effect, we're going to type save. It's rebooted, and that's the last reboot of this part of setting up iNav. Now, I know that was a slightly longer than normal episode. I'm looking at the timer over there. It says 28 minutes. Probably with a bit of editing, we'll be down to about 26 minutes. But my point aside, we've just been and put all the basic settings in here. From here, it's all happy days. Next episode, we're going to go and connect up our receiver. I'm breaking that into a separate episode because that does allow me to go and set one up for PPM as a separate episode for those of you who are going to be using PPM. I'm going to be setting mine up for S-Bus. We'll do that in a separate episode. After that, we've got the GPS. And then after that, we're going to jam on our ESC. We're going to go and connect up our servos and talk about the installation of our flight controller board into our models, which is this. We are on the home straight now, so this is classed as happy days. If you have any questions about anything which we've been covered in this episode, please just ask in the comments section underneath this video. Also, I'm going to strongly urge that you do take the time, the effort, and the energy to go and have a read of the fixed wing guide over on the iNav Wiki, and a link to that is down below underneath this video on YouTube. So as always, from myself, Matt, cheerios!